The world's worst humanitarian crisis is taking place right now as we speak, and it's neither taking place in the Middle East nor in Ukraine. It's taking place in Africa, where Sudan is witnessing the world's worst humanitarian crisis. United Nations agencies say that around 10 million people have fled their homes since the army and paramilitary clashed over a year ago for power in the capital city of Khartoum. But this recent catastrophe has decades-old roots and hardly anyone is talking about it across the world. Here's a report on the tragedy that is unfolding in the northeast of Africa and the future of Sudan.
Graveyards in East Africa, Sudan are filling fast. Bodies of men, women and children are piling as food continues to remain a scarcity. The civil war between the Sudanese Armed Forces or SAF and the paramilitary Rapid Security Forces has plunged the country into chaos. According to projections by UN agencies and aid groups, an estimated of 756,000 people in Sudan could face catastrophic food shortages by September. 54% of the country's population is already facing critical shortages. The impending famine is a direct consequence of a clash that broke out in April 2023 in Sudan's capital city of Khartoum and Darfur region. The fighting forced millions to flee, triggering the world's largest displacement crisis.
Some 12 million have been forced to flee their homes in Sudan, with over 2 million crossing borders into neighboring countries, mainly Chad, South Sudan and Egypt, often arriving in extremely vulnerable conditions and highly traumatized.
The roots of this clash go decades back. The ethnic conflict stems primarily from long-standing tensions between the Arab-dominated north and the non-Arab African communities in the southwest. In 2003, the region of Darfur saw its first instance of violence. Rebels from the Sudan Liberation Army and the Justice and Equality Movement launched attack against the Sudanese government of Omar al-Bashir, accusing them of neglecting the Darfur region. The Sudanese government responded with a military campaign with allied Arab militias targeting non-Arab ethnic groups. Reports indicate over 1,000 villages were burned down. In 2004, 1 year into the conflict, the United Nations declared Darfur the world's worst humanitarian crisis. An estimated 1.2 million people were displaced, and tens of thousands were killed in the ensuing violence. In May of 2006, the Darfur Peace Agreement was signed between the Sudanese government and one faction of the SLA. However, other rebel groups rejected the deal. In 2007, the United Nations and African Union deployed a joint peacekeeping force to Darfur in an attempt to stabilize the region. The mission was one of the largest of its kind, with up to 26,000 personnel.
Let's be very clear. The civilians are the ones that have no responsibility, no fault of their own in this conflict, and yet, as so often happens, they are the ones paying the highest price.
Despite peacekeeping efforts, clashes continued, and an estimated 300,000 deaths were reported. In 2009, the International Criminal Court issued an arrest warrant for Sudanese President Omar al-Bashir on charges of war crimes and crimes against humanity. However, al-Bashir denied the charges. In 2010, another peace agreement was signed in Doha, but it failed to bring any substantial breakthrough in the crisis. In 2011, through a referendum, South Sudan seceded, with 99% of voters in favor of an independent country. The period from 2011 to 2018 saw fluctuating violence, and the civilians continued to struggle with basic necessities. In 2013, the Rapid Security Forces also came into being, originating from the Janjaweed militia, accused of ethnic cleansing against Darfur's non-Arabic population since 2003. In 2019, following mass protests, the Sudanese military, led by Defense Minister Awad ibn Auf, ousted President Omar al-Bashir, ending his 30-year-old rule. A transitional military council was established to govern for 2 years before elections. The government promised a commitment to peace in Darfur. In October 2020, Sudan's transitional government signed a peace agreement with several rebel groups, aiming to end conflicts in Darfur and other regions. However, communal violence and clashes continued in parts of Darfur, along with another coup in 2021, by General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, who took over as the head of the state. The clash intensified in April 2023 as the rival military factions, SAF under General al-Burhan and the RSF under the Janjaweed leader Hemedti started fighting, which continues to the present day.
Sudan is the world's largest humanitarian crisis.
I can speak more about Sudan. I am very keen to single it out first because I think it is a crisis that, and this is not applying to you who report from here, so hear about that a lot, but generally doesn't really make it to the headline. Is a very forgotten crisis, although it's one of the most catastrophic ones, not just in terms of displacement, but in terms of hunger, lack of access, violation of human rights, and so forth.
As the war worsens, the civilians continue to suffer in alarming conditions, with a possible famine looming and a disguised genocide. There also seems a lack of persistent international attention as conflicts in Gaza, Ukraine and Haiti take center stage. The crisis calls for urgent action from the international community instead of being meek, passive observers, while countless innocents suffer and perish.